Okay, hello, good morning, everyone. Yeah, it's really great to see so many of you here. Here, some familiar faces, some new one, and I hope you have all had your morning coffee today. And because we have a very exciting session ahead, and I promise that it's going to be worth your time. My name is Dika Permana, and I'm a postgraduate student of accounting science. And today, I have the privilege of getting you through these academic talks on publishing in the Reputable journal, a topic that many of us as an academic and researchers constantly think and sometimes stress about it, but I hope that we will enjoy it today. So, before we dive into the main session, I would like to invite Prof. Desi Adriani, PhD, Head of the Department of Accounting, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, to give a few words of welcome. Please welcome Prof. Desi.
Okay, good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Our students and also lecturers, so today we have the third session, So we will discuss about the world of academic journals and publishing, insights and stories from Prof. Charles Cho, who has already had many experiences, in publications, and I hope that Charles can give us the insights how to plan the publications, because of all our students, especially students here, doctoral students, they should publish before they can graduate. Maybe the system is quite different, or is it just the same? So just please tell us the strategy, and also how we can increase the publication of our lecturers despite the administration and also the teaching task that we have to provide to our faculty. So that I hope that this morning session will give us all insights about how to publish, not only for the sake of publication, but also for the impact. Okay, thank you very much. So I think that we can please enjoy the session today. At the afternoon session, we will have the session for our students, master and also doctoral students. Please, we only have 3 presenters for the afternoon session, but we invite all of you to attend the afternoon session so that you can engage with Charles on how to publish, and also the research project of your, you can share your research project and get insight from Charles. Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Prof. Desi, for the warm opening and support to us. And now allow me to introduce our special guest speaker. We are truly honored to be joined by Professor Charles Cho, PhD CPA. He is currently a professor of the Schulich School of Business, York University in Canada, and also holds the prestigious Erwin K. Hub Chair in Business and Sustainability. Prof. Cho is widely known in the academic world for his work in sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and accounting for the public interest. He has published extensively in top journals and is frequently invited as a keynote speaker at international conferences across the globe. So we are very lucky to have him here with us today to share practical insight on how to get our research published, and actually not only published, but published well. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Charles Cho. We are gladly to welcome you here. Thank you.
Thank you again for this nice introduction. I guess by now you know me. Spent all day with me yesterday. Hopefully it's not too tiring. I promise I'm leaving tonight, so you won't see me again for a while. No, I'm very glad to be here. They made a really interesting and intensive but nice program. I think by the time I finish this, that's all I got for you. She extracted everything out of me for these 2 days, and I'm very happy she did, because it makes me also, when you do these presentations, obviously, not a secret, I've done that a few times. It refreshes you, makes you think more. Sometimes I get carried away for other duties and stuff, and then go back to this. But I do, because of my editorial role, I was asked to do several times these kind of workshops, so I'm quite familiar. I can almost guess the questions you're going to ask, because I've done it so many times. But sometimes I get some very interesting questions as well. So I kind of made up this title for other talks, as I said, because I do have some insights. I will give you, probably everything I know about publishing process. But I have some bad news for you. Okay, I don't have the magic formula for publishing. So if you came here to listen to say, Professor Charles Chu is going to give me the formula to publish in the top journal, sorry, because there is no magic formula. There are some basics, there are some fundamentals that you need to be aware, but there is no guarantee. There are some stories I can tell you. We have a lot of time. I also want to leave a lot of time for questions. I told Desi that I will probably last about an hour and 10 minutes, and then the rest is really up to you to ask me questions, okay, based on that and based on your personal cases. But I have some other, not maybe bad news, but other existential questions. And it relates to some of the things I talked about for the Accounting for Impact workshop yesterday, seminar, right? So, I got big questions for you. Big questions, existential questions. Not life-threatening questions, existential questions. Why do you want to publish? Actually, tell me, why do you want to publish? Exactly. Yes, very good answer. Others, why do you want to publish? Those who have finished their PhD, because I am aware of some countries, universities that require actually publication. I found that a little bit crazy, to be honest. Like Finland, for example, you don't have to publish one, but 3 papers alone to your PhD. Completely nonsense. But anyway, besides finishing PhD, those who have the PhD, those who have PhDs here, no, they're almost PhD students. Okay, so lecturer who have PhDs, why do you want to publish? So promotion, there we go, promotion, of course. Promotion, keep my job, right? Stay alive, right? Yeah, or publish or perish, right? Yeah. Also, I think I mentioned yesterday with the P word in publication. Publication sometimes comes with money, pay, right? You have to think it's the real reason for you to publish. I'm hoping there's more than that, besides finishing a PhD. We talked about the impact yesterday, for example. Okay? But that's a good question that you have to ask yourself. Because sometimes you might get into a situation where you are so frustrated with the publication process that you're going to ask yourself that question. Is my life worth it? My career, like, do this, see for the rest of my career, right? The second question is, what and where do you want to publish? That's the second question. Because publishing a blog is a publication, publishing even a podcast audio is a publication, in fact. Of course, publishing a book is a publication. Publishing of course, an academic article is a publication. So now the question is what and where? So of course the answer is, for the reason that we're here, is academic work, my research, and you want to publish in academic journals. Why? Well, because this is what you are supposed to do as a job. It's true. And it's not a criticism. I've done that many times. It's part of my job. But I'm just putting this question up front to make a big picture of this, so that we don't go too soon into the details, and look at the big picture of what we call the publishing world. Right? But then you recognize this slide. I just put it back again from the Accounting for Impact workshop. Again, isn't there more than just publish? Just for the sake of publishing or just for career? And we thought, you won't laugh anymore because you know these jokes, but yeah, it's about also some impact. Okay, so I think we should consider that, because whenever you will choose your publication topic, your publication outlet, everybody dreams to publish in the top ranked journals in the world. Of course, we all want that. Everybody thinks that their PhD dissertation is worth going to the top journal. Of course, we all do that. But at the end, it's not necessarily the most important thing. It is important because it will determine, maybe your career path and whatever you can do after the publication. But you have to think about the impact. And again, publishing in the top-ranked journal will give you, in theory, more impact. But yesterday, I showed you some data that some people publish in the top journal and there's no impact. So sometimes you have to think about the what more than the where, and the why more than the where, right? Those questions are important. I'm just putting some articles because I just found from a previous presentation that some people ask me, do you have any publications that are some activist nature, some controversial, some academic articles that generated controversy and debates? And so I thought about this one, 2011, Astroturfic Global Warming is basically criticizing the fact that we have front groups that lie about climate change, literally, act like they are NGOs, and probably they are paid by the big companies to act like they are a fake grassroots movement, because AstroTurf is basically a brand of fake grassroots used for synthetic sports. And so when I published that article, somehow, and I was actually quite happy, and then less happy, it was picked up by some specific focus group that were anti-climate change, that were like flat earth, like crazy American groups. And on online, I was getting attacked right and left. I mean, at some point, some comments were a bit scary because I mean they can find me, they know who I am, and in the U.S. this is considered communist research, right? Because it's very left-wing, and so this you also have to be aware that when you have this kind of strong publication, that this can pick up. So why was I happy? Is that somehow an academic article made it through a non-academic audience. Wow, they read somehow probably just the abstract, which is enough, and they attacked me online. Okay? But then I was less happy because it was scary. And I was less happy because I thought that there were some really crazy people in this world, especially in the US. This is back when I was in, well, this is not even what I do. I was in Canada, but for some reason it ended up in the US. This one got picked up by, this is about reputation work. This one got picked up by the AACSB Education, and they cited some articles, and I thought that for a body like AACSB or accreditation body to pick this up was quite nice. So that's why I call it activist. But then, yeah, this type of article also got some spotlight because of this title, like front stage, backstage, organized hypocrisy. But then what I want to get to is that when I basically took these two articles that are kind of related, and I made a blog, putting all the four concepts together: sustainable reporting, front stage, backstage, facades, and hypocrisy. And I did that in 2019, and that one got quite a big traction online as well. I think this led me to get some interviews, for example, like in front of media or writing a blog, etc. So I'm not saying that it was activists like on the street and all that stuff, but it just catch attention. And you want that. Even though it could be a bit risky, like the first one I told you was scary, but you want to try to make an article that is scientific, published in a good journal, and provocative enough that people actually take a look. And the best feeling is when you have a non-academic person who actually kick up the article. In a Accounting Forum, I didn't put it here, there was an article on it was about the first election of Donald Trump. And it was about, I can't remember exactly, but it was about the environmental policy behind. And we published an article, and it did get really big. They actually asked interviews to the authors, just reading the abstract. So that's the kind of publication that you should aim for to be out there. Of course, if I go back to yesterday's workshop, you should also try to make your article visible. That doesn't change. But just having the article as it is, picked up by a non-academic community, such as the media or regulators, that's actually a good thing. So try to keep that in mind when you do your research. Yeah, and then this one I think I talked about enough yesterday about my anger about the CSR. And then what I did is I took these two articles and then made another blog out of it, right? Two blogs. So this is the thing that you could do when you have one or two or three related articles and you think that it has a good chance to get picked up. You write a blog. I use the EAA ARC, as I told you yesterday, on Accounting for Impact, and it generates debates for sure. Right? Because if you just post this on LinkedIn, it's not going to have a lot of effect. If you do something like that, it's a short text of like 500 to 1,000 words maximum, and then people can understand it. And don't copy your abstract. Your abstract is also an academic article. Make your abstract more accessible. So, going back to the publication process, the first thing to know is, within even the accounting community, accounting world, you have to know the journals. You have to know journals very well. I think the last time I was told and I saw, there are over 200 accounting journals. 200. Okay, so of course there are some of them you probably will never hear about, you never heard about, but there is more than 5. That's my point. Okay, but there is also a way to know what the journal. Every journal has some kind of identity, and it's also where you will end up publishing. Because if it's your topic, the journal that welcomes your type of research, your topic, your method, your theories, very likely this is the journal you want to submit. Okay, you're not here to take a huge risk and submitting to a journal that never talks about your topic. So that's not going to work. So you maximize your chances to publish in journals where your topics is already kind of discussed, published, and welcome. And that's kind of what I call the new family, right? I mean, you're gonna use a lot of acronym, AOS, CPA, AAA, TAR, DAR, RUST. You don't even say the journal name anymore. It's like a code name. That's your family. Right? And then you also want to know who published in those same journals, because those are the people who are part of your community. Now, of course, there are some journals that are much more general, and it's all over the place, and you have journals that are much more specialized. So, for example, you have journals that are only publishing tax research, and you have journals that publish only auditing research, and then some other like critical research, and then you have generalist journals such as, I'll give you an example, European Accounting Review. Even my journal, Accounting Forum, we publish from capital market research to critical research. Doesn't matter. That's harder to do to build a community, but I'm talking about let's focus on these more specialized journals, because that's also a good way to publish research. And you authors, you want to go meet them. Okay? Even if it's online, if it's an email, online meetings, connections, and at conferences, go there. If you have a chance to go to conferences, don't be shy. Don't go to your room after the session. Go and socialize with people, even though they're not necessarily going to be directly in your area. You want to know your key authors, right? Also know what is good and what is not so good. So in journals, the 200 journals, there's a big variance on quality. There are things that are not so good and you wonder how the heck this get published. And then you also see some papers at conferences and they have hard time to get published. You don't understand why they don't get published. But for what is published, you have good things in top journals and you have good things and bad things in all journals, right? So you have to train yourself to read and what's the best research out there in published in those journals. And when I say that it's tricky, I'm not saying that you should just read, but you have to learn how to pick up the points of each paper. Okay, and of course, as a PhD student, I read every paper in detail because we have to. Every week we have big intensive seminar with 3 people in the room and you have to discuss the papers. But when your career moves further, you have so many other things to do, the time will be more problem. So you have to learn how to be a little bit more efficient, to go for the contribution, to go for the methodology, the theory, and just say, okay, this is, worth, this is a good paper. And just because you said you read the latest paper or whatever you think is the best paper, there's probably something better coming up every time. So keep updated, up to date on what's coming out of these new journals, because you haven't read the best yet. Always going to be something. So, the guide. So this is a little bit more tedious technical. And this is not a magic formula either, but this is kind of basics. It's mostly based on quantitative research, even though I don't consider myself only quantitative researcher, but I think it's easier to explain, it's maybe more common in places, I just made a choice, but it's all very similar even if it's qualitative. This is the most important part of your paper, in the introduction. And I just stop here because before I go into the details of how to structure introduction, a lot of times I end up writing, or my co-authors and I end up writing the introduction last. Can you imagine that? Yeah, we already last. Last part, that's a trick. You can have a draft, a very rough draft of the intro, but because of the paper, how it's going to evolve and how you're going to structure it, you're going to have to change it anyway. So you may as well write it last. In the introduction, what you want, the first thing is, you don't want a 15-page introduction. You don't want a long introduction because that's not an introduction. Okay, you want to keep it as concise as possible. I would say between like 5 and 7 pages maximum. I've seen some shorter ones too. Here, The first and second paragraph, probably the most important one, you have to sell your research. If you don't have a catchy phrase or something that hooks the reader, you could almost lose them right away. So you need to have a setup, background, but not too much background, just something that is, provocative and raise curiosity. Huh? Really? Kind of thing. Take this reaction. You have to write it so that, okay, I want to read more. The second, third, and fourth, you have to just problematize your issue. What is the problem? You don't have to go around and say, no, the problem that we are investigating, the issue, or you have to be very explicit. You have to say why it is important. Of course, you think it's important, but you have to convince others that it's important. And then, how are you going to address this problem? How this question or this issue, how are you going to do, what is your paper going to do to address this problem? And here, I insist, you say, literally, you write, the purpose of this study or the objective of this paper is, and you write. Not some kind of nice sentences in poetic ways, blah, blah, blah. Very straightforward, okay? No jargon. No, this is the place that you should definitely stay away from too much technical terms and academic terms. Okay? Because let me tell you something. Sometimes editors read the introduction and then either stop or continue. So if you want me to read as an editor or as a reviewer, in fact, well, the reviewer is not supposed to read the whole paper, it's rejected, but for me to get interested, you need to write a nice introduction. And I have to admit, in the many papers I published, some introductions, I regret them. This is not a good introduction. But sometimes you get taken by time, pressure, you don't really see the big picture. But then in some papers, I'm very proud of my introduction. So it depends. It's not perfect, but it still reminds you that this is such an important piece of the paper. The reminder is just very structural. You say, this is what we're going to do, theory, design. Okay, the last part is indicate key findings. So there are two camps on that. So you don't want to put all your findings in detail in production because then they're not going to read your paper. Okay? And are somewhat sometimes considered weaker than hypothesis. It's true. But they allow you to be more flexible in some ways. Now you are depending on some luck in that sense, the reviewer, how open are the reviewer to use your research question. But you can justify that by saying, because we can go either way, I don't know if it's positive or negative or increase or decrease, then you can resort to research question. It may not work all the time. I've had probably a big mix of both. But it's also a nice thing to see that authors acknowledge that I'm not going to hypothesize about research questions. Reviewer like humble authors. Reviewers don't like cocky, pretentious authors that I know this and this is the language you use. So I saw that in my paper. So it's got to be a little bit more humble. It doesn't change really much. Just the way that you present the paper, but it doesn't change. You will still do your same test. But I still want to raise that point of the directional hypothesis, have a theory. So the method, again, quantitatively, you describe the sample, how the measurements, the design, procedures, and tasks. Task, if you, let's say, do experimental research. So you should describe exactly what you did. Okay? Don't be too complicated and technical, although that's kind of a technical part. Try to make it as simple as possible. This is what we did. Just describe exactly what you did. And make sure that you can use something like appendix. So the best use of an appendix is to put all the variables in a table in the appendix. If you don't, okay, you measure this variable this way, you got it from the database. Some people put in a table in the paper, but some journals like mine have word restrictions. You don't want long papers, so you put that in appendix online, available. If readers want to see your variable, they're going to look at it. It's not a central piece of it, it's just a method. Then, I am a big fan of using figures and tables. That one, I think that is very helpful to visualize the model with arrows and boxes, like even, especially in actually in both qualitative and quantitative research. You know the saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words, so visualize it, you explain it, visualize it, then okay, you. Sometimes you have the modeling effect, sometimes you have the reverse effect, sometimes you have a loop effect. You just put as a visual, and you should be able to draw a picture of your design. In fact, if you're not able to visualize your model, then you didn't really understand it. You should be able to explain that. And tables, not, I mean, some journals will ask you to do 15 tables, very sensitive, but some kind of tables to get data organized. You can be creative as well. In quantitative, it's more standardized. Like it is okay, you have the descriptive sample, and you have the correlation matrix, and you have the typical. We have the first 2 or 3 tables are the same, and then you have the regression table. In qualitative research, because it's more, diverse type of presentation, you can use a better visual as well. The results. How do you present your results? So with your methods, this is what we did, and now this is what we found. So the first thing is, this is my descriptive. As I mentioned, the first table is usually descriptive. Then usually you'll have, I didn't put it here, but you have correlation matrix, how these variables are correlated with each other. So you have this triangle kind of variable data. And then you just put results table. So for hypothesis 1, or research question 1, research question 1, if you want to, and then some people don't even put the findings, they just say, we did this. Basically implying, if you want to know more, read the paper. And then you have this in-between strategy where you kind of say, we kind of found this very broadly. I think that's a good way to attract. Oh, wow. And then you put your surprising findings like very vaguely, and then, of course, you detail them all the findings actually. But I'm not crazy about putting detailed findings, and some journals will actually tell you, remove that from the introduction. Because it kind of wastes the purpose of the introduction. The introduction is a tease, okay? It's a selling point. Like, oh, I want to know more. So if you just tell them everything, you give everything away, then your sale fails. You're not going to sell. It's like a sample. Give you a sample of food. Okay, I want to taste more. That's what you want to do, right? And then last paragraph is like, okay, the next section will do this. This is a boring part. Just write 1 paragraph on that. And remember that, you understood that I will send you all the slides, so you don't have to worry about that. So, in the second section, what we call either background, prior literature, prior research, and because it's a quantitative method, the development hypothesis. So first, the literature review is what you want to do is describe each study, and you don't want to have like 35 studies to show that you actually read the paper, even most of them didn't, just to act like they did. No, you actually choose very specific papers from the literature that relates to yours and say how it's going to differ from yours, right? And how your study is going to kind of fill the gap. And I know that there is a big debate, discussion. Research should not be about gap spotting and gap filling. Well, in a way, I'm sorry, but yes. Because they say, yeah, you have to make this bigger contribution. Sometimes you have to find that hole in the wall to fill. That's what you do. So I think that it's still valid to say you have to fill some kind of gap. It depends on the size of the gap and the type of the gap, right? If you just want to say, I'm going to fill in the gap because I'm going to add the one variable just to see what happens, that's a harder sell. But a gap of like a different perspective from a different angle, or a different sample, a different context, okay? Or a contrasting theory or something. And so make sure you also include recent work. But I also say also include older work, because you have those what we call classic papers that you cannot get away from. Just a few, just to show that you understood that, just a few lines. Sometimes you can even use a table, an appendix, or footnote. And of course, if you have a target journal, and I discussed that if you already have one, because it's not always the case, then it's probably a good idea to find some papers that are kind of related to yours. Because as I mentioned, if you submit in a journal that have nothing to do with your topic, then it's already a lost game. So you want to have a good section on that. What you don't want to do, as I mentioned, is just go, you know what, this study has done this, and let me show you that I read my 35 papers, but these papers actually have nothing to do, or very not exactly directly related to my topic. That's not good, okay? And then sometimes you plagiarize others, you actually take even your own. It just becomes a bit of a disorganized section. And I've seen too many of these sections. Okay, so streamline it, but make it complete, make it very efficient to attract, also to make it more effective. The theory, you have to really understand your theory. It's not just sort of a copy-paste of a theory paper or book that you found. Is, okay, make sure you show that you understood the theory on your own words, and also how you're going to support the theory. And if you have any competing theory, don't ignore them. You cannot ignore that the fact that this theory, like yesterday I gave you an example in the sustainable accounting research, we acknowledge always that legitimacy theory is there, but voluntary disclosure is there too. Okay, no big deal. So we have to be sure that you master the theory part and not just take some paraphrase, copy-paste things from a paper. Okay, understand in your own words. And sometimes you're gonna know that you may not understand it that well because the reviewer will come back and say, hey, this is not how it works. But you have to be very sure about clearly state the essence of theory. And then this is more technical in terms of the hypothesis. So if you have a quantitative paper, you're going to have some equations, regression, and you state your hypothesis in terms of your what we call IV and DV. So independent variable, dependent variable, not their operationalization. The operationalization is another step in the analysis. And also say how we're going to test this hypothesis. So all of this is part of the one section. That is pretty a longer section because you have to put literature review, the theory, and how you develop your hypothesis. Okay, so make sure it's just very structured and very consistent. And then if the hypothesis have some null, there's a null hypothesis, alternate, be careful that if you can only put a directional hypothesis, so the increase or decrease, use of increase or decrease, has to be supported by theory. If you don't have a theory, or you can go either way, use a research question. And research question, the order, because sometimes it sounds so obvious. I have some authors that have put 3 hypotheses, but then they present the results of the third one first. What kind of logic is that? So just be consistent with the order. You wanted to test this one first, hypothesis H1, give me the result of H1 first. It sounds obvious, right? But you'd be surprised how many people get so disorganized. Okay? Then you discuss the result. So there's one thing to describe the result. Okay, so we found that this is significant variable, this is not significant, the hypothesis is supported, not supported. But you have to do more than that. Just describing the result, everybody can do that. You have to interpret your own results and say what they mean. That's what we call discussion of results and implications. You can either do that in the same section, because this section, the result is relatively short. Or you can beef it up a bit with the discussion. And in the discussion section, this is also something that you can put that in a separate section. Because as I said, the result section can be short, but if you have lots of hypotheses, like 6 hypotheses, then that section becomes long. So then maybe you don't want to add more discussion, then you just take a separate section called discussion. You say, I discussed my results here. So it's not usually a necessary thing, but you can even combine it. You can do a little bit of creativity. What I like in the paper is to have relatively balanced length section. So I don't want a section that is like 5 pages and the other one is like 13. So you want to kind of like have it balanced. Like 4 or 5 pages per section, for example, roughly. And then you can try to generalize the findings. So this is a tricky one. Obviously, for qualitative, just to be clear, with those quantitative researchers who think qualitative generalization is a problem, the point of qualitative research is not generalization. So leave us alone. It's not the point. Okay? It's contribution theory, it's depth study, it's insights, different. So we don't have to worry about that for qualitative, but you have to still, in qualitative research, the trick is you have to be very detailed and thorough in understanding the data. Your interpretation of the data is so key to the paper. Here, you're going to try to make a generalization in quantitative research, and you have to just be sure of what does it mean. And you can also have this, what is it called, ad hoc sensitivity test. So what if we do it this way? What if we just separate the sample that way? What if we add this variable? Or, you know, you can do it that way because you're going to play with your data a lot. So you're going to find something interesting, put that here as what we call a sensitivity analysis. Right? And important, don't ignore the non-support hypothesis. Ooh. Well, let me put it this way. So in my PhD, the 2010 paper, I will talk quite a bit actually about that paper because it was a very good learning experience for me. I have to admit there was 3 hypotheses for my PhD, and 2 were supported, the one that was published, and 1 didn't. Okay? For my PhD, not a problem at all. I still had to explain to my committee why this was not supported, why I think it's not supported. And I was advised that when I submit to the journal, you should rewrite the paper so that you don't really include that part. I wasn't sure about that. This is really ethical and so on. And I think when I presented at conferences, I did include that not-support hypothesis. Fortunately, that hypothesis was quite distinct from, you could take it out and the story kind of the same, doesn't really affect. But you will be in some situation where you have a series of 2 or 3 or 4 hypotheses. And within the hypothesis, you have like H2A, H2B, H2C. You have a sub-hypothesis. You might have that. Now, that one, if you have something that is not supported, you're kind of happy because they're part of your study, they're part of the design. You cannot just remove it. And so, some journals, even my journal, and if you have like, let's say, 3 hypotheses and let's say 1 is not supported, they will still publish it. But you have to be very clear, or we don't ask you to be 100% certain, but you have to say, what might be the reason it's not supported? So I published papers, not this one, not the one I talked about, with out of 5 hypotheses, 1 or 2, no significant result. Why so? And as long as you try to provide an explanation, reviewers will understand. If you have no hypothesis supported, then that's hard to find. But you know what? Even a non-supported hypothesis is a result in itself. So the trick to justify a non-significant result hypothesis is what? Is to make this non-result a result. Okay? Make it a result. You should not ethically do, the null hypothesis and change the hypothesis. No. You have to just say how it is and just say the fact that we didn't find a result is actually interesting because you can make it a result. That's a difficult part, but that's actually probably the best way to address it. And then the summary and the conclusion, you combine with discussion results. Okay, as I mentioned, this is where you summarize your key findings. So be careful not to repeat the discussion, but just summarize the key findings, paragraph, implications for your study. That's what I meant yesterday for impact. What is the implication for research, but especially for practice, and maybe even for society. Some journals ask you a specific section, practical implication, societal implications. And this is where academics get stressed. Oh, I don't know. There's none. That's bad. Find some. Seriously, like it's important. And then you cannot pretend that your paper is perfect. Every paper, even in top journals, are subject to limitations. Mostly limited sample, lack of generalizability, different contexts, you name it. You don't have to spend weeks to find your limitations, but you have to find at least 2 or 3, list them, and then what seem to like limitations and what are not limitations. And you don't end your paper on limitations. That's not good. Your paper cannot end on a negative note and say, oh, I did all this, but limitations. Thank you, bye. No. What you say, you finish by, what can I do to address this limitation or future research? And you open avenue for research and say, our study has done this, that far, this much, and in the future, we think that it would be good to push this study further or differently, and then that should be the end of it. And that actually gets picked up, gets cited, because some authors might actually really like your ideas of that last section and do it. Or you secretly do it yourself. Say, hey, I'm following up on my study and I'm just doing an extension of the study with a different context, different variable, different sample, whatever, different methods. Because a lot of time we'll say, a typical classic of quantitative research, future research is, well, you know, we're not able to get in depth, so we should encourage qualitative research. Okay, they're not going to do that, but that's what they say. To get some insights, we should interview those analysts, or we should interview those auditors, etc. Right? And this is a bit trivial, but not so trivial. Please make sure you cross-check your reference. I know that there are software out there. Believe it or not, I'm still staying away from those software, but I know they're very good at make sure that the reference you cite in new paper are referenced in the list, and the one in the list are there. It's very frustrating to look at a paper and you're interested in a quote or citation, you go to the reference page and it's not there. Or you look to the reference list, you go, wow, this is a, and then you find it like, it's not cited. Just, this is so trivial, so easy to do. I still do it manually, believe it or not, because it makes me even more focused on the paper. But my co-author think I'm crazy, so when they do the last check, they use the software for like Mendeley and all that stuff. My problem with the software is that the styling and stuff, it's not to my liking, it's not perfect. But that's not true. Anyway, the point is, double check, cross-check the references, and the style. So I know it's a pain in the butt. Each journal, each publisher has their own referencing style. To me, I look at it like, you know, those electric plugs. So you have the plug with the thing, in the UK have the plug, and I don't know the point. They don't make any money on this reference style. But it's so telling when you have a very deep, very specific format of a publisher, you don't even change it, and you submit to another journal. It shows that you don't really care much, right? You didn't pay attention. It's not going to cost you the publication, but you know, it doesn't give you a good impression. So you want to be as thorough as possible in the reference. Now, in terms of and this was the structure of the content, the form, this is the weakest point for non-native English speakers, right? Because the English, unfortunately, the dominant colonialist language remains on our times. Unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. You can argue that Mandarin is the most spoken language of the population, but it's only in kind of one place. One thing that English manage is they impose the language. So unfortunately, we speak English now. It's the international language. You know, you like it or not. Yesterday, my team beat an English team, so I'm happy that we can beat some English sometimes. We don't want them to be world champions. We don't want English to be dominating the world. But in language-wise, they manage because that's what we speak. Okay? So that means that and it doesn't mean that you have to publish in English. You can also publish in your own language journal. I mean, you know, actually more and more journals like mine will open to publish papers in French or in Spanish or Italian. But then you actually like it to do some impact because the readability. Then you have to translate the version. Expensive. Anyway, long story short, you unfortunately have to be able to write clearly in good English. Now, how to do that? Well, one, you take intensive class and you just become very good at it in writing and this. You practice. Second option, you get a co-author that is a native speaker that is a good writer in English. That's, unfortunately, those are the pragmatic solutions that I found. And I was lucky enough that my first language, by the way, is French, okay? So when I did my study in the US, I was relatively good in English, but at the academic level, I always felt a little bit like a bit behind. Of course, you learn, you practice, you read reading. But I talked a lot about him yesterday in the afternoon, and I met Dan Patton. He's one of the best concise writers in the continuing research in the world. He's able to say a lot of things in a very concise way. All of his papers are so short. Okay? His most cited paper is like 5 pages, AOS 1992, 20,000 citations, 5 pages. Okay, so you don't have to write 30 pages to be cited and have impact. Okay. And so I learned a little bit, and I haven't written with him for a while, but when I was a student, I learned how to write this way. So my papers with him, obviously, but with others, kind of resembled that, but then I got working with other co-authors, and then they love to write. But I have now open for any questions that you have. Thank you very much. Long paper, then I was like, so my point is get help. Get help. I'm not gonna say to use AI because AI can trick you. Don't do that. Translation of people, all that stuff. You can check, but make sure you double check with a colleague who can at least look at your English. You can use also, if you have the budget, copy editing service. You write, you send the paper in English, and they fix the grammar, the structure, everything. Some of them are super good. So, also, as I mentioned, short sentence, short paragraph, the academic writing, long sentences or 5-line sentences, avoid. Because at the end of the third line, you don't even understand what you're saying, even yourself. Cut the sentence to 2 or 3 sentences. Make sure you don't invent words. Sometimes you invent words, and you think that this is a word. Go to the dictionary and make sure it exists, that word. Okay? Seriously, right? So this is ideal, very difficult to do, but one sentence should have only one argument. And you know what? I will talk a lot about argument in a minute. Paragraph should have an idea and also have a very carefully planned section. Like you have a skeleton, an outline of what's needed. Make sure that this is where you take a step back, put the paper for a couple of days, and make sure it makes sense logically. Just come back to it and say, okay, the storyline, the narrative is there, and everything is consistent. Your statements, your arguments. Okay, plagiarism, I don't have to define, I think plagiarism is copying people's words like you own, including yours. If you do that, you have to cite them, but you don't want to be citing everything in your paper just like that. Huh? Use quotation, one with very, very strong statement, but try to avoid plagiarism. And you're going to write many versions of your paper. The first draft is never going to be your final paper. I've had versions where I had V22, 22 versions because of co-authors going around. Sometimes it could be a major change, sometimes it could be a minor change, but you have different drafts. Okay, so don't expect that it's going to be your first. Expect to write several versions of the paper over time. Now, these are the questions that you should try to think about. You should be able to say in a few words what you did, why you did it, what you found, and why it matters. So the question is how, what, where, when, and so what? So what question? So what question? Which is in the limbo. Limbo. So what? But it's not a question of limbo and impressing your colleagues about reading the paper. It's for your paper that you really have to say, so what? Okay. Think about what you want to say and how you say it is going to take more time than the writing. So, maybe not so much these days, but I used to have lots of good narrative in my head when I was taking a shower. Or when you were in the private place, in the toilet, bathroom. Sometimes you just disconnected from everything, just think about it. And the mistake I made is when I finished my shower, I should have written down right away and I forgot. And then 10 minutes later, you forgot. That's it. Sometimes even when I'm driving, it's hard to do, but now I should press the button on my phone and say, just speak. I know people who do that all the time. I know people who are like driving long distance, and they just talk to themselves to record themselves. I'm not at that stage yet. I feel like I'm a little bit crazy to do that, but you know what? It's not a bad thing to do, I think. Because you'd be surprised of at that moment how some sentence and words and ideas can come together. Now what I do is I'm walking around and I have my phone available. I either type it or I'll try to record it. But anyway, you have different tools to take it today because this takes the time. This one. So you have a nice paper, a nice story. This is what I want to publish. I love my paper. I love my story. But you know what? During the paper writing, it's not going to be exactly the same paper. And it could be a different story. Don't be afraid to change that story slightly or even more significantly. You have to let the story tell you. You don't impose the story. Let the story tell you. Let the data talk to you. You may write a paper, a story, and then you say, you know what, I looked at the data again, and I found this, and it changes with my story. From the moment where you refuse that, you're going to be pushing yourself in the corner. Okay, I experienced that. So very stubborn. Me and sometimes my co-authors just want to get that story, that theory. And sometimes it's not the right answer. Sometimes you have to be open to change. So don't be afraid to let the story tell you. And communication. So the key principle is keep it simple, stupid. It's to be able to tell your grandmother or your mother that she understand it. I'm not saying your grandmother and mother are stupid. I'm just saying that they are not academics. So it's very normal that they don't understand what you write in academic papers. So try to, obviously you're not going to write a paper like you're talking to your mother and very comfortably, but think about that as well. Is my audience going to be able to understand what I'm saying? And I'm torn between saying using very academic language to look so smart and PhD. Actually, I'm not torn. I think this is BS. But I'm for a simplification of the language for papers. Oh, and this is kind of go back to what I said. Like even the second point is, you are working so hard on a paper, passionate, but learn how to take a break, do something else. I don't know, like prepare your classes, go to the beach, meet some friends. For a couple of days, you stay away from it because your brain fries. Your brain gets saturated with the same topic for hours and hours, especially for PhD students. I've done that before. I tried to do intense this one paper for like 5 days, 6 days in a row, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. At the end, it was crap. It was bad work. At the end, I looked at it, I was like, I spent 1 week doing this crap? Yeah. But sometimes I learn, it's like, my supervisor told me, hey, do something else. Just stay away from the paper, just come back to it. Much better. Yeah. Now, during my PhD, I did spend some, even sleep in the office sometimes. So obsessed by it. Crazy. Yeah, it's not a good thing. I mean, working hard, it paid off, but not on the same thing over and over. And ask for help, just like you ask for help for English, ask for help also to get some feedback. So, you know, people's time is precious. So, you will likely get a sorry no. But until you get that, you have to ask. And you know what? They may say yes. They may say, well, just give me a couple of weeks, and I can give you some feedback. Okay? It could be your other top professors, it could be your peers in your program, your PhD, your colleagues, but it could also be somebody from outside. It could even be the people who are writing this beautiful theory or this beautiful paper. It's intimidating, right? But you know what? You'll be surprised how many senior academics are actually so kind and they will give you the feedback. They may not give you super detailed feedback, some will. Some will actually put handwriting notes on your paper, scan it and send out. Then for our own paper and my other paper. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. What's the worst thing that can happen? Sorry, no time. That's it. Move on. So, and also accept the fact that if you get harsh comments, accept them. Don't be offended because you asked for it. If you only ask for feedback that is so, you know what, you did a great job, but you can ask ChatGPT and then tell me it's a good paper. Yes, it's a good paper. Are you happy with it? Yeah, sure. No. You need to be able to accept your feedback. You ask. So, I mentioned that I will talk about some arguments, and this is going to be maybe helping you. This is kind of a simple way to look at, but let me do that, and then we'll go into the editorial process, and then we'll take some questions. So, research as an argument. So, argument, first of all, it's not arguing that you are fighting with somebody. It's arguing to make a case. I'm going to define it. But what's important here in this word is probabilistic causality. I know it's a bit of a complicated word, but it's very simple. I'll explain that. So, don't have to explain it now, I will get to it. So first of all, what is an argument? It's not the fighting again. It's an attempt to convince somebody else of something using some evidence. So it's almost like you're in a court. When you present a case with evidence, you convince the judge and the jury that this is true or this is false. So it's an argument. So it's different than the argument that we think about fighting with not agreeing with somebody. So that's an argument. So making a good argument is very useful in a paper because you have to convince, well, the reviewers and the editors, using your evidence of the paper, that this paper is, true. I mean, my case is true and it's valid, it's relevant. So it consists of one or more pieces of evidence, what we call premises, and a conclusion. Simple. You put evidence and then you draw a conclusion. So, what's the benefit of understanding arguments? I can better appreciate what others are doing in the research. Because if you understand them, you can read the paper and say, hey, your arguments need this strengthening or it needs a bit improvement. It helps me better in my own studies. It makes me a much better reviewer. And it helps me understand, respond to the comments or reviewer of my work. So when I deal with reviewers, I can see, oh yes, this is where my argument was weak. Okay, this is that. Example. Late Professor Upgrade has published hundreds and hundreds of articles over his academic career. He is the greatest accounting professor in the world. That's an argument. I see some smile and I say, well, maybe not, I don't know, okay. Okay, I'm a football fan, so I'm going to put a famous player. Zlatan Ibrahimovic has scored hundreds of goals over his career. He's the greatest football player in the world. You can say, oh, this guy never won the World Cup, he never won the Champions League, he scored a lot of goals. Same as Rob Gray, he wrote articles, but what makes you say he's the greatest person in the world? What is your verdict? But this is an argument. Okay? Now, go back to the first example. This is what? This is the evidence. If you go to his CV, his late CV, this is past, you can see that he wrote really hundreds and hundreds of articles, notably on social and macro accounting. But you evaluate the premise, is it true? So yes, we have validated that you don't even have to look at CV, you can search for his work in Google Scholar or whatever, you will see hundreds and hundreds of publications. Right? How validated? We found it valid. And then, go back to the second point, blue, he is the greatest accounting professor in the world. What is that? That's a conclusion. That's a conclusion you derive from the evidence. And you are making this kind of connection. And this is where the trick is there a connection? Is it valid? Does it work? Is it true? So logical evaluation is, if the premise is true, so in this case it is, but we assume it is, does it logically lead to that conclusion? And of course, between the example of Rob Gray and the example of Zlatan Ibrahimovic, no. We agree that it is not enough good evidence to conclude that they are the greatest accounting professor or greatest football player in the world. So you see that how an argument could be invalid or weak when you have that kind of argument. You can have good evidence, conclusion, but the connection with what leads to the conclusion may not make sense, or you may not agree. How do you define the best accounting professor in the world? How about his teaching? Maybe he was a horrible teacher, maybe. Okay, but for you, for us, maybe, well, if you're not a good teacher, you cannot be a best accounting professor in the world. So that's what we call a causal argument. Something causes something else. You're showing that because he wrote hundreds of articles, he's the greatest professor in the world. In this case, we have kind of failed. But you know what? Some may say, I agree with it, I buy it. Okay, you could do that. Now, causality, there are two kinds of causality. There is this strict causality, okay, and we're going to look at how we can build an argument with strict causality. It will be something like this. After X happens, Y occurs. Okay? Number two, if X does not happen, then Y would not happen. So you have the both positive happens, and this doesn't happen, well, this doesn't happen either. And, very important, there isn't anything else that is possibly causing Y. So the only reason that can cause Y to happen is X. That's very strict. That's medical research, and you hope that they do know what they're doing. So, for example, I hate to bring it up again, COVID-19. You want that to be true. You want to know that this is the cause of COVID-19. I don't think they really found strict causality yet, 100%. But all the medical research, you really hope that they know what they're doing with strict causality. Science, hard science, biology, physics, things that actually impact our lives as society. But we are not a medical doctor. We are accounting doctors, not real doctors. Okay? We don't save lives. If people call you on the airplane sick, Dr. Cho, I don't raise my hand. Because I don't know how to cure the ill people. I only know how to cure accounting, so it's not good. Okay, so joke aside. The other causality is called the probabilistic causality. And this is more in line with social science, which we are. We are business management. We are not hard science. We're not chemistry, physics, biology. We're not that. So this is a bit different, nuance. After X happens, then Y tends to happen. More nuance, right? It's not Y happens, it tends to happen. If X were not to happen, then Y would probably not happen. We're not sure. It's not clear cut. And then third, as you can see, what's anything else? There isn't anything else that is playing a larger causal role than X in bringing about Y. So yes, X has a role in causing Y. Yes, maybe. But there may be something else. Whereas the previous one is only X. Right? That's the difference. So you saw the difference between strict and probability? The nuances, the fact that it could be other factors, the fact that it may not be 100% at cause. You know, sometimes we look at this regression in accounting and business research. You have this number called R square. Statistics, you know, R square is how much the variation of Y is explained by X, right? You know what is considered a good R square? The perfect R square in the strict is 100. Anything below that is probably. You know how much in accounting good R square is? Like 10 is okay. 10% explain. You accept that. 5% R square. So you don't explain 95% of the variance of this variable, and you still validate the results based on the other tests such as p-value, statistic association. Knowing that we are purely operating in a probabilistic causality. Okay? Of course, sometimes you have a bit higher, 20. It never goes actually above 50. Really rarely. So a real example that we done together with Dan, actually, I have to give credit to also Patton to provide me these kind of ideal arguments. In this paper, basically we found that environmental performance is negatively associated with a degree of optimism and positively associated with a degree of certainty. I think yesterday when I shared my findings, I think this I showed that. Therefore, firms with worse performance use impression management to reduce potential impacts of the action. Evidence of the test, conclusion. The second one. Now, we are in the probabilistic part. So let me show you that after X happens, Y tends to happen. Company with worse performance, which is X, exhibit higher optimism scores. We tend to see Y. So that's the first condition. Number two, if X were not to happen, then Y would probably not occur. Companies with better environmental performance, so no X, with lower optimism, we don't see Y. So lower. And then the third point is an interesting one because this is what caused it was one of the major points, well, not major, one of the points of our second or third revision at AOS. It was it was such a dumb mistake from us not to consider that, but it was like, oh, thank you for the wake-up call. It was this. There isn't anything else that is playing a larger causal role than X in bringing about Y. And in here, we had not included the proper control variables. Except the performance variable, is there anything else that can impact the optimism of certain disclosure? Well, from theory, we've proven that inclusion of control variables such as size, industry, capital intensity, return on assets, company age. Analysis with only companies with noted concerns, other sensitivity tests. So it allowed us to include those variables to make sure that there is not anything else bigger than the performance. We include those variables. So it's an example like purely, not just that paper, all accounting papers, all social science papers, research, operate in this world of probabilistic causality. That's what it's called. And that's how you should evaluate the argument, not in a strict causality mode, but in a probabilistic mode. So the role of the reviewer in the publication game is that you are evaluating whether this argument is strong or not. That's the job. Do you believe in the evidence? Does it make sense, the methodology? And does this lead to the conclusion of your paper? That's what the reviewer is supposed to be doing. And help you to make it better. How good is the evidence? How logical is the argument? Especially the last item, the probabilistic argument. Is there any other factors that cause it why? That's what a reviewer, when you're going to be, even a PhD student, you might be asked to review. I ask PhD students to review my journal. That's what you want that. Okay? Summary, as academic researchers, we are very much living, and I'm talking academics in a social science, in the probabilistic causality world, and that maybe even more so for those engaging in quantitative large sample because of the example I showed you. So we need to show this. Basically, I just could repeat it, but good research, good argument should have those 3 points. Okay, you have evidence, okay, and then you have this causality, but it's a probabilistic causality to have. All right, now to finish, and probably the part that you are expecting the most is the publishing process. So, how many of you have gone through a publishing process or are in the middle of it? How many of you have ever submitted a paper to an academic journal? None of you. Yeah, yes. You submitted. Whatever happened, yes, you submitted. Okay, you submitted a paper to an academic journal, academic journal. Okay. Just you? You too? Okay. So what I'm telling you, hopefully, matches what you experienced in different outcomes you have, right? So first of all, there's no shortcut like this month. Like this guy, it's not like that. Okay. So first of all, do you have to think about a journal before you write the paper? Good question. In theory, yes. In theory, because of the background literature, you're supposed to have an idea of the journal because that journal publishes kind of your research. But just like I told you, let the story tell you, hey, if the story changes or your opinion changes, or you get some feedback, you could change the journal. You could also start. I've done some paper with co-author who said, yeah, I'm not sure, let's see what happens, let's just do the paper and decide later. You can do that too. So there's not a clear answer question. Then I just said at the beginning, but you need to know the journal. If you target this journal A, what does it like? What does it emphasize? What theory? What method? Some journals, no way they're going to publish qualitative research. Or some journals, no way they're going to publish quantitative research. No way they don't want anything critical. They want mainstream stuff. Just study that. Don't send a rough draft. You know what? It's free because most journal solutions are free. And you know what? Let's see what happens. The reviewer, the editor will do the job. Oh, I can read the first page or first few paragraphs of the paper and I can see that this is the case. Not only you're going to get a very strong rejection because it's bad, but you're going to end up on my blacklist. Reputation. Because I know who you are as an editor. The reviewers don't. Don't play that game because words go fast, names travel very fast. WhatsApp is very efficient. Hey, do you know this person? Boom. Yes, no. Good or bad? Bad. Okay, over. It's could be like that. Reputation. It doesn't really happen like that, but it could. Send the paper to more than one journal at a time. Let's send the same paper to 10 journals, see what happens. Okay, you want to end your career? This is where you end your career. This is completely illegal and unethical. In fact, some journal website ask you, make sure you sign that you only submit that. Why? Because this belongs to that journal. You can resubmit after you get rejected as many times, but not at the same time. It seems obvious, but I've seen cases like that too. And then try to have some tweaked version of the paper, so you have a paper and then you kind of like add that one little small variable, or worse, you translate the paper in English or in Indonesian and you submit to another journal, and that way you have two publications. No. Yeah, it's not two papers, it's one paper in two different languages. So don't do that. Do not, in red, don't do any of that. That's subject to career end. Reputation, you're done. Don't do that. Most journals reject your submission. So another piece of bad news, I don't have a magic formula, and I tell you that it's almost normal to be rejected. So congratulations, you are in the majority of about 90% of papers that get rejected by every journal. Some journals reject 95, some journals reject 80. The acceptance rate is so low. So do not be depressed if it happens all the time. I got rejected 2 months ago. Now it depends on how you take it, but we'll talk about that. Respect the auditors, author, and reviewers. It's a small world. How does it work? So editors receive the paper. The editors ask her or himself, is it appropriate for our journal? Is it in our style? Does it look like there is something substantive there? No? Then it's called a editorial or desk rejection. Don't come here. Because the paper is just not ready. I'm not going to waste reviewers' time. Yes? Okay, then depends on the journal policy or editor. I can select 1, 2, or 3 reviewers. So in accounting, the norm is 2. But some journals decided to go fast track for junior scholar or whatever, 1. And some journals want 3. It can be an open, single blind, or double blind process. So open doesn't really exist in accounting or social science. Open means the reviewers know the author knows the reviewer. And of course the editors know the editor. Single blind means that the reviewers have the identity of the author. So the paper comes non-anonymous. Not so common either in social science. Most common is double blind, which is editors get the paper and I know who the author are, and I choose the reviewer, but if the reviewer the authors, they don't know each other. It's supposed to be anonymous. Now, the anonymous, confidential anonymous is this online world, conference world. It's hard to, authors can kind of guess the reviewer, and reviewers can kind of guess the authors. Not 100% of the cases. If you go to conferences, you press the paper, you submit the paper. Conference programs on how. Or, even better, the reviewer was in the room. I mean, it happens, right? So sometimes the reviewer would say, should say, not sometimes, he should say, I know this paper author. And me as an editor, sometimes I would say, do you feel comfortable to make an objective review? Sometimes I say no, sometimes I say yes. It's up to the reviewer and the editor to decide. But ideally, it should be an arm's length, blind review. You don't know the author, you don't know the reviewer, you just review the paper. Reviewers are very busy and they are not paid. It's a volunteer job, it's part of the community contribution that you do as an academic, and they decide and they recommend whether this paper is publishable. So they make comments, based on the comments, they make a recommendation to the editor, and they say, I recommend that this paper is good, but it needs to revision, major revision, minor revision, outcome, or reject. Now the comments, and I'll talk about this timing thing, but they return the comments, and the decisions come from the editors. The reviewers do not make any decisions. They make recommendation to me, the editor. I can actually embrace and accept this recommendation. Sometimes I can say, well, the other reviewer said something else. Actually, that's where my decision power is. So it could be straight rejections. So the easiest for me is both reviewer reject the paper. There's no way for me that I can save the paper. If I revise or accept the paper with two rejection recommendations, I totally lose my credibility. And this reviewer may not ever review for me again. What are you talking about? Yeah, because the other reviewers know each other's recommendations in the system. I think some journals do that. You can also have make a decision to reject or resubmit. So it's like, we like your paper, but you have to rewrite everything because we only like the idea, but everything else you have to rewrite. So that's better than rejection, but that's a tough one. Like, rewrite the whole thing. Then you have what you want, the next four. Revise, resubmit A, revise, resubmit B, two versions of that. Minor revision, and accept without revision. Well, that one, suspicious. Something happened to the money exchange, other exchange, bribery. So let me go back to the revise, resubmit A and B. You have ideally some of the clear reviews, two reviewers, straightforward. Sometimes the reviewer actually recommended reject, but the editors looked at the other reviewer who said revise or submit, and that's a hard part for editors, a split decision. I go for major revision, but it's pretty straightforward what the reviewers want. It's a lot of work, collect more data, change theory, rephrase this, reposition that, whatever. At least there's a path, right? Now you have also this revise, resubmit B, which is, you know what? I could almost reject it, but I'm still going to give you a chance. The door is open the business. It's a tough one. You don't know exactly what to do. That's the most difficult because you don't want to give up on the paper, but you don't know what to do. So sometimes I get some, rarely the author write me, ask for clarification. Even me as an author, I did that. So this is like a very, very, very risky revision, and then you have those who are risky but still good. That's what makes it. Basically, there's a range of R&R. Okay, there's a spectrum. Minor revision usually comes after a second or third round. How to minimize rejection? So when you we get to rejection, how did you react? What's your reaction? Sad and painful. Did you get the result for your submission yet? No? Did you get rejected? Oh, major revision, celebration, congratulations. Because sadly in this world, not to be rejected is a celebration. I'm not joking. Because now you are part of the minority winner of not being rejected in the first round. I'm hoping you're going to continue, but if somehow you get rejected after 2 or 3 rounds, it's going to be painful. I'm sorry to say. And I hope it doesn't happen to you, but it does happen. Okay? So, sad and, you said, furious, no? Painful. Yeah. You insulted, get furious, not you, but some people get very insulted. How dare they reject my PhD paper in this top journal? My paper is worth Nobel Prize and publishing something. How dare? So what you do is that you should lock yourself in a room and cry, mourn, take a vacation. Just try to forget about it and do something else for you. And then come back to it. We know it's horrible because it can be personal. Rejection can be, but let me tell you something. It's not your first one and it's not your last one. Just sorry to say. It will happen. It's part of the process. In fact, never be rejected is almost suspicious. Like you have a good money relationship with some editor or something like that. It's suspicious. It's part of the game. You want to avoid because you don't want to keep rejecting. So how to avoid? The main reason is not good enough research, not ready. You don't know the journal. The paper is not developed enough. You haven't gotten conferences like feedback around like enough. Because, I presented papers in sometimes 10, 12 conferences to get feedback. By then, you also get known, and maybe it's a good thing or not, but reviewers maybe are in the room. 10 conferences, I think they are. contribution is the biggest aspect of rejection. Okay? And then sometimes you just pick the wrong journal, and then when you actually go for the second, so for your case, don't be arrogant and fight with the reviewers. Do what they ask you to do, because if you're arrogant and fight, which my co-author tried to do one time, and I said, dude, calm down. You need to get this paper published. He was so mad about the reviewers' comments. They don't know anything in the theory, which is true. They really are. Calm down. We're going to write a very strong response, polite, and we manage. But sometimes by emotion, you can be like, wow, whatever, fight, and then reject. We don't want that. Then, R&R, this is an extreme example, but this was a former editor of Academy of Management Journal, who actually, as a response to reviewer comments, wrote 13 pages single space, and then reply is 31 pages of comments, not the paper. That comments the comments were longer than the paper. Crazy, right? Says, yeah, it was as much as work to reply than writing the paper, of course. But at the end, it says it was rewarding. Yeah, it was rewarding because it worked for you. But can you imagine? I'm not saying that you should go like extreme, but this is how serious and depth, intense it gets this process. But my point is, respond to every comment. Okay, so this colleague here, you should take your point of each comment, copy paste it, and then respond to each of them. You can also say that I'm not able to do that because, and then this is when it becomes too long. You have to explain why you didn't do it. Because sometimes you cannot do everything they ask for. So you have to explain why you cannot. Okay? Oh, it's a bit of a that's good. Woo! And then another point. On the other hand, if you incorporate everything that the reviewer asks, you could end up with a color like that at the top, and then after the reviewer asks you, you're going to end up with a car like that. Because they ask you to do this, minor revision, this. The question is, are you okay with that? Are you okay with that car? Because originally, you want that car, but after revision, the paper published is going to look like that car. Most people are okay with that because they get published. But you know what? Some people are saying, heck no, that's not my paper. And the key is, you don't want the reviewers to become your invisible co-authors. It's not their paper. So if you are standing strong that I don't want to go there, sometimes you end up withdrawing the paper. I have done that before. Not a lot, but I've done that. Because I didn't want to go that direction. I asked the editors if it was a break or make deal. She said, break? I said, well, thank you very much. It was at the top zone, I was at AOS. So sometimes you have to have the courage to do that. Because you may not, your name forever isn't that paper, forever, remember. So you want to be known as this author of this bottom car or the top car. But of course, the top car, for sure, as submitted, it will change. But do you want to change it this much? Or do you want to change it this way? Or more physical? You want to be that at the beginning? Okay, you started with the left and you end up on the right. Or a pizza could end up like that. You know, is that what you want? I mean, it's a serious question. You have to ask, do I want that much change of my paper to become like that? Remember, your name is on this paper forever. Now, most people end up doing the changes. They don't mind doing that. Because at the end, in general, the paper has improved. It just looks very different. It could look very different than what you have in mind. If you're okay with that, no problem. Do it. But just be aware. Okay? You don't have to. So, as an author, it's pretty simple. For me, novel, current, relevant, wow effect is what makes the paper publishable. Embrace collaboration, embrace co-authorship. Yesterday, I think I mentioned that in all the papers I published, I think I have like 2 or 3 sole author papers, and the rest is with key collaborators. The design, super important. The results, you cannot control the results, but if the results are not counterintuitive or wow or surprising, hard to sell, writing, language, editing, again. Feedback at conferences, feedback, is it the right choice for your journal, and responding to reviewers at a very good level. And persevere, because you can also be sick of this part. Now, to finish, I'll share my experience with the editor. So, in terms of time, sometimes you may wonder, why does it take so long to get feedback? How long did it take you to get the rejection? Did you get the desk rejection or rejection with reviews? Desk. Desk is good enough. How long did it take you to get your decision? Ooh, that's fast. So the average is between 3 and 6, 3 and 4. Okay? Why? Because I always wonder, when I was on the editor, I'm asked to do review, submitted in 5 weeks. 5 weeks. Okay, so everybody told me in 5 weeks, why do you take 3 months to give me feedback? I'll tell you why. Because now I'm on the other side of the fence, I know how to editor. I receive the paper, it's not like I'm on 24/7 standby, 911, charged to look at the paper. No. I have a life, travel, I work. So it may take me a few days before I even get to the paper. But right now I'm in Indonesia, I receive papers, I'm not going to look at it until tomorrow or Monday, I don't know. Then I have to decide on the paper, that's reject or not. But decide to send for review, and I have to think about reviewers, invite reviewers. Usually the system allows 1 week to 10 days to respond, yes or no. Trust me, some reviewers take 7 to 10 days to say yes or no. By then, if everybody responds in 10 days, I have paper on the review, that takes about 2 weeks. And once it's on the review, your system says it's due in 5 or 6 weeks. Of course, there's always somebody who's going to be late. One of the two, 95% of the case. So let's say that the first reviewer on time, 6 weeks, the other one takes 2 more weeks, 8 weeks. So it's still very good. So now we have 8 weeks plus 2 is 10 weeks. Then I get the review. Then I'm not also a 911 standby. I get to the reviews when I can within the next few days. I have to carefully look at the reviews. If it's 2 rejects, it's pretty easy. If it's 2 R&R, pretty easy. Split decision, I have to make my decision. Then I send my decision. So if you add up 10 weeks plus a few weeks, it easily gets to 12, 13 weeks. That's what it takes. And that's a fast part. Some feedback takes 4 or 5 months, sometimes 6. After 6 months, I would start asking the editor what's going on with my paper. But before 6 months, most times because I don't have control of it. And I have to admit, I am also late in my reviews once in a while. It's not easy. So it happens. Getting good reviewers is so hard. That's why if it's really not have a good chance to move forward, the desk reject happens more often. Because I don't want to burn reviewers. I mean, like I send them so many copy papers, the reviewer will say, stop, and then they say, no. My other strategy in my journal, I have one of the largest editorial boards, 130 members. So by make them on the board, I responsibilize them. You have to review, I think, a minimum of 4 papers per year. So that's a nice strategy. But it's people's time and people's. You can get reviewers, but you want good ones. You don't want the ones who do sloppy job. Sometimes I have some problem with these reviewers. In case that it happens, so they review the first version, R&R, and second version, and they refuse. I'm stuck now because now it's too late. And to convince them to come on. Sometimes also they get a little bit upset because I went against the decision. I recommend the rejection. Why do you want me to review the paper? Look, the other reviewer said that. You take a look. Professionally, you're supposed to go all the way through the process. I already said it. Hard part, split review. Strong rejection. Sometimes a strong rejection, minor revision. That's like the too extreme. Whoa. So some editors, I won't name them, would systematically call upon the third reviewer. Oh my God, this is terrible. Maybe take another few months to get a third opinion. I was both a third reviewer, I hated it, and I was also an author subject to a third review, but rejected. So I don't have good experience with that. I'm just saying that editors have to make the decision. They have to make a call. And I always say, I may make the right decision, I may make the wrong decision, but I make a decision. Some editors is like, oh, I'm going for the third reviewer, and then of course, 2 against 1, I go there. Easy. You can ask ChatGPT. And don't laugh, I think it happens, unfortunately, seriously. Yeah. Reviews are done by AI now, so it's just to the point. Very difficult position. And the fit with editor aim and scope. Usually, so accounting forum is hard to, we don't reject based on that because anything accounting and related to accounting is part of the scope. But if you go to critical perspective, if you go to journal business ethics, I'm an editor too, go to journal, the taxation journal, it's outside the scope, it's not. Crazy story, two crazy story and our stuff, okay? Crazy story. But don't tell anyone, there's no need. Small world. I received a manuscript to review as a reviewer from Journal A, right? I recommend rejection for bad paper. Okay? And you know what? I received the same paper, 24 hours later, to this journal, another journal, and associate editor. Yeah, too bad. But now I know who you are. And now I'm going to get rejection paper again. But 24 hours in the journal, not even making any change. I made comment. I spent time. This guy or this author. Don't even bother. And the same paper they sent the journal. Well, no luck, I'm just a solicitor. Yeah, that's it. Another one, more complicated, last one. Small world. I received this time as an associate editor for Journal A. Okay? I sent it for review. One of the reviews immediately tells me that he has reviewed the same paper 2 days ago on another journal. Okay? Look at the picture. I send the paper for review. This person is hey, Charles, I reviewed this paper for this journal. I investigate, and the associate editor for the journal informs me that she or he gave a R&R decision for that journal. I was like, okay, so then the journal is still in that journal. The paper is still in Journal B. What's going on here? I later find out that the author had actually withdrawn the paper from Journal B, thank God, but the system and the A did not. So I felt a lot better. I proceed to handle the paper for Journal A, okay, but the editor asked me to select another reviewer. So now it's no longer in Journal B, but it took a lot of work to find out. And now it's in my journal, but then, then they asked me select another reviewer, get rejected again. It's a crazy story. And then, no, it's not over. A few days later, the paper is received by another journal, which is edited by the original reviewer. Now that's a crazy story. That author was really not lucky in getting people that know everything about this paper from Journal A, B, and C. The key is, in this lesson, that when you receive a paper with comments, take the time to make some changes. Because if the paper didn't come back that soon, then it would be not so bad. But they just didn't care about the comment. Me as a reviewer, the first story, I was so mad. How can they? I was like, you know what? Now I know who you are. So you are just out of luck. Yeah. But this one is kind of a innocent mistake, withdrawn, not knowing, and then it was a crazy story. That's why I put small word, taking your shoe, and small word. Okay, so that's a juicy story, but I have others that I cannot necessarily share. I will never share any names, but I can. Yeah, you can also ask me questions like that. So the last thing I got when I was a PhD student about publishing is a game. It's like football. It's a game. You win game, you lose game. Take it as a game. Because at the end, it is a game of convincing with arguments. Reviewers, those who succeed in publishing are not necessarily smarter, they're just perseverant. They are very stubborn. And that's why it's probably the best is to just keep your fun stuff like you're doing and you know that's motivation. Keep motivated. But it would be hard to keep motivated all the time because you have some downtime for sure. You have, I got rejected, I'm not worth it, blah, blah, blah. No, just more, it's not like you're less smart than the others, because you just have to keep track. Okay, so I think I am done, but I have now open for any questions that you have. Thank you very much.